I think we are live. Yes, we are live. We are live. So, hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing great. And welcome to our August session from the Microsoft and Azure user group. I'm your host, Badr. And if you don't know me, I'm a senior consultant at Blue Harvest Belgium. And I'm a lead software engineer at EBN AMRO. And we have and yeah, before that, for the people who were able kudos for the people who were able to join us on the Microsoft build in June. It was a nice it was a nice event. We had many people come in, and yeah, if you missed it, we are trying to do every month a session, and we bring nice interesting speakers. So for today and for this session, we have two interesting. So we have an interesting topic, and we have also an interesting speaker. For the topic of today, uh, the topic of today is understanding Azure skills for Microsoft Foundry. And as you all know, everything now is based on skills, open cloud. So it is very interesting topic. So that also show how the mindset of the speaker. And our speaker today is Promising Wachuku. He is a lead DevOps engineer at Rabobank and also a senior consultant at Blue Harvest Netherlands. He is a five-time Microsoft user MVP and also eight-time Microsoft certified trainer. And recently he became a regional lead for the Microsoft global community. So kudos for Promise for the new achievements. Um, so yeah, Promise, I will put you in.
Hello, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Promise?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm doing
First,
great.
kudos for the new regional lead.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, you select this time a nice topic.
Yes.
User
Yes. Yes.
skills.
Yes.
I
I
will,
did.
I will give you some time to give a brief explanation, and then you can start your session.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the topic generally is focused on understanding Azure skills for Microsoft Foundry. So the goal is to explain and to give a background idea on how skills work in Microsoft Foundry and how people can be able to make maximum use of them. So that's the idea for this particular session.
Nice, nice.
All right.
And
Okay.
now the floor is yours. And
Thank you.
good
Thank
luck.
you. Thank you. All right. All right. Thank you very much, Bada, for that wonderful introduction. Like I said, today's topic is going to be quite interesting. And I say it's quite interesting because we'll be looking at, you know, understanding, um, understanding Azure skills for Microsoft Foundry. And I'm sure some of you may be wondering what really is Microsoft skills, right? Um, um, the aim of this session is to give you an understanding into that. So, in case you're wondering, please just relax, have a sit on the, I would say, a nice cool chair, take a pen and, try to jot down as much as you can. And I'm hoping that at the end of the day, you would be able to work with the existing Microsoft skills we have, and if possible, use them to create and manage your models in your Microsoft Foundry environment. All right. So I would proceed to the next slide. In case you're wondering, who am I? My name is Promise Uche Unwachku, like Bada earlier said. I'm a Microsoft MVP for Azure. Last year, I was for both AI or Microsoft Foundry and Azure, right? So basically, what I do as an MVP is I try to educate the community or this community as much as possible. And recently, I became the Microsoft Global Community Initiative Regional Lead, right? And the whole idea of this is to, you know, enhance communities around, right? And be able to build more communities while gingering the existing ones we currently have. All right, so I will proceed on this topic for today. But I think that it would be more, you would have a better understanding of Microsoft skills for Foundry if you are able to understand what the Foundry control plane is, right? So, um, the Foundry control plane, look at it as a unified window where you can use to manage all of your agents, which you're running your agents, your models, right? It gives you an overview of all of the agents which you currently have running in your subscription. So you may be wondering, I mean, why do I really need the Foundry control plane, right? So the goal of this is to explain to you how Foundry control plane links to the Azure Skills, right? And what's the link between both of them? And how, at the end of the day, can you be able to make use of the skills for Microsoft Foundry in your Foundry environment? All right. So I did made mention that, look, in order for you to understand how skills work, it would be nice to give a touch point on Foundry control plane, right? And like you can see here, your Foundry control plane is like a unified observability platform, right? Where everything is centralized, like a central layer that integrates, monitoring of your agents, identifying your agents, ensuring your agents are compliant, and the entire life cycle management of your agents and models in one platform, right? And another definition of the control plane is, look at it like an agent fleet management, right? Look at it as an agent fleet management. Basically, it's the control plane is the plane that gives you an overview of all the agents which you're running in your subscription. You may not know why you need the Foundry control plane, but if you are now working in an organization where you are running over 100 agents in your Microsoft Foundry, then you have an understanding why having an idea on how the Foundry control plane works goes a long way, right? Another way which you can look at your Foundry control plane is it's like an attribute for a platform that ensures every agent adheres to what zero trust principle. And of course, enterprise grade security standards are enforced. So this is one way which you can use to understand what the Foundry control plane does. And in simple definition, right, your Foundry control plane is a unified management interface that provides visibility, governance, and control for what your AI agents, your models, and tools across what your Foundry enterprise. So, in other words, your Foundry control plane centralizes the management of your AI agent fleet from building phase to what the production phase. Now, let's go ahead to see more features about the Foundry control plane. Now, this is an overview on what the Foundry control plane looks like, right? So you are able to look, or let me say, have an overview of both the security of your agents, the compliance of your agents, fleet management of the agent, and observability of the agent, all in one view, right? So in one platform, you are able to have a view of all of these components, right? Now, in seeing the security view, you get to see the identity of your agents. You get to see who is accessible to your agents, right? What airbag controls does your do your agents have, right? And also, talking of compliance, of course, you want your agents to be compliant to your company policies, right? So you're looking at guardrails, policies, and controls, right? And then, of course, in terms of fleet management, you remember I mentioned in your organization, if you're running, for instance, about 100 agents in your subscription, you want to be able to have an inventory of all of those 100 agents, right? You want to be able to carry out orderly actions on them, and of course, agent discovery. You want to be able to discover new agents that are created in the subscription. And then lastly, in terms of observability, we want to also look at traces, evaluations, and metrics, right? So the Foundry control plane gives you an overview of all of these what components. So that's one very interesting thing about the Foundry control plane. All right. Okay. That's good. So the next thing I want to bring to your attention is, let's see, okay. The next thing I want to bring to your attention now after this is um a view of the Foundry control plane itself, right? I mean, you should be able to have an understanding on how that works, how the Foundry control plane works, and how you can actually um, get that centralized view of your agents, right? So here is a picture that shows your subscription, um, the total number of projects you're running in that subscription, right? The total number of agents, in this case, you're running 14 agents out of 15, right? 14 agents out of 15 are currently running, right? And of course, you can see the estimated cost of running all of these 14 agents. You can also see the token usage and the agent success rate, right? And of course, all of this view is what has happened in 1 month, right? So this is what the Foundry control plane does. It gives you an overview of all of the agents you're running in your subscription. Now, let's move on to um, what does skills, what problem does the skills themselves actually solve? So now remember that when running your agents on your Foundry environment, there are lot of things you want to do. So it's possible you want to create more agents. It's possible you want to decommission your agents. It's possible you want to check how are your agents behaving, right? So for instance, you set up an agent to be able to achieve something. Is your agent actually doing what it's supposed to do? How can you tell, right? What analysis do you need to do to ensure that, okay, your agents are doing what they need to do, but at the same time they are not breaking rules? For instance, using foul languages in communication with your clients, right? Or for instance, using words that are generally not pleasant in a formal environment, right? So this is where the skills come in, right? And you can see here it says the skills helps to what update the agent behavior without redeploying, right? It keeps it keeps the behavioral guidelines consistent across every conversation, eliminating what duplicated instructions in what agent code. Now, to have a view or an understanding on how skills work, right? Look at it like a workflow. A workflow, right, targeted to a particular use case or a particular scenario. So I would give an instance, right? Let's take an instance. You created an agent to be able to do something. For instance, say um, for you created an agent to plan your trip, right? And you say you want this agent to do everything from the moment you tell it your destination. It should look at what are flight fares, what is the cheapest fare within your budget. It should look at how long your trip is going to be for, right? Then also when you get to your destination, the agent is going to look for accommodation for you, right? It's going to look for accommodation for you. It will tell you, let's say, how much each of these accommodations are charging, and what would be the the fees for this accommodation. If you also want to, for instance, rent a car, or you just want a car temporarily to use while you're in your destination, your agent is going to look at the closest um, car vendors around who can lease their cars for the duration at which you are at your destination, right? And it will tell you the price of that transaction, and it will also tell you how much it will take you to return back to where you're coming from, right? So you can see that this agent is doing a lot. But then, how do you ensure that every time anyone in your organization talks to this agent, the agent performs as expected? It doesn't go into a loop of unnecessary answers. It doesn't wonder or give answers that do not relate to what the user is asking, right? So, I mean, that on its own, right, lets you know what we are actually working with. You understand? That on its own lets you know what we are actually working with. So you can see here, before skills, guidelines are duplicated across agents. Every policy change requires redeploying each agent individually. But now, after skills, updates to the skills are what done once, right? And of course, you then have a consistent workflow across your environment. And here, we talked about, okay, what is the format for writing your skills, right? What is the format for writing your skills? Of course, we talked about the required YAML front matter, the name, the description, and of course, the behavioral instructions which you want your agent to be able to perform, right? And yeah, it's demo time. So let's actually then take a quick look at the agent. So here is my Azure portal. Here is my Azure portal environment. And if you remember, I spoke about an agent. I spoke about an agent that handles, the travel and all of that. So the name I'm calling that agent is what? The Contoso Travel Agent, right? And like I mentioned there, the agent does a lot, right? The agent does a lot. But how then do I ensure that this agent stays grounded? Right? How then do I ensure that this agent stays grounded? So, for instance, I would say, let's talk to the agent and let's see what the agent does. And I'll say, okay, hello, Contoso Travel Assistant. I'd like you to plan a 7-day trip to Qatar, right? So let's say, let's communicate to the agent and say, hello, Contoso Travel is assistant. I would like you to plan a 7-day trip for me to Qatar. Yes, so now I send that to the agent, right? So now you see the agent is now responding to me and it's asking me questions. Um, your dates, I would say, maybe I would say uh, October 10th, right? 2026 is my date. Um, so now you see the it's looking at October. You can see now it has already planned what it wants to do for me in can see. So look at what it says here. Arrive at Hamad International Airport, settle in your hotel. Um, so you can see the various activities it has planned for me, right? And I would say, how much is the hotel? Like, what are the hotel rates in Qatar, right? What are the hotel rates in Qatar, right? So let's see what it says. So you see, it's giving me various options of hotels I can find around, right? So it's giving me the various options of hotels I can find around. So you can see that this agent, it's actually doing what is expected to do, right? You can see that this agent is actually doing what's expected to do. But now we want to make use of a skill to actually observe, right? And see if this agent doesn't go astray. Now, remember this topic is understanding, the topic for today is understanding Azure skills for Microsoft Foundry. The last time I checked, Microsoft Foundry has 20 skills, right? So I think here is a list of those skills. If I'm not mistaken, let's see the skills for Microsoft Foundry. Okay, let me get those skills for you the skills for Microsoft Foundry the last time I spoke. So skills are not just related to Foundry itself. Um, there are skills for other aspects in Azure, but we are basically focusing on the skills for Foundry, right? And you can see here when you want to perform, I would say, different activities, these skills come into play. And remember, I mentioned to you that skills are like a workflow that you use to manage your agents or models which you have in your environment. Now, um, here are the various skills that Microsoft Foundry currently has, right? And of course, you can see that each of these skills are targeted towards a function, right? So, for instance, if you want to deploy an agent, you see the CI/CD, invoke, routine, invocations, WS, observe, trace, troubleshoot, create, agent optimizer, eval data set, project create, and private network. So you see, all of them here are about 20 Microsoft Foundry skills, right? And like I mentioned, they are like a workflow. So if for instance you want to put your skill to use, you can just call, so far your MCP server is running in your VS code, you can call that skill, and the skill, the VS code connects to your Foundry MCP server and start making use of the workflow which you have called. So let me show you an example of a skill. For instance, observe. You know, I told you that we are going to actually do a demo with observe skill. So look at the observe skill, and this is what it does. So the observe skill is responsible for observing the agent. You can see agent observability loop, right? It orchestrates the full eval driven optimization cycle for a Foundry agent. That is what this skill does. And when do you use this skill? You can use this skill when you want to what? Evaluate your agent. When you want to run an eval, you want to test your agent, you want to check agent quality, run batch evaluation, analyze eval results, and then definitely things revolving around if your agent is actually performing the way it should, right? And you can see when calling this skill, the various steps which these skills take depends on all of this. So you can see it starts to take the step to evaluate. It creates an evaluation suite. It analyzes, it optimizes, it does a comparison, and then CI/CD monitoring, and then it proceeds to do what? The continuous evaluation, right? So these are what I would say uh, are the protocol or the workflow, right, that an observed skill needs to follow, right, in order to be able to give you the expected results which you want. Now, to actually test if this works, we are going to be doing something, right? We are going to be doing something. The first thing we're going to do is actually run a live session to test if that actually works. Right. So, in order for us to do this, we'll be making use of a workshop for today, right? And basically, this workshop is going to be making use of what? Your is going to be making use of your observe skill, right? So to do this, I'm going to bring in my VS Code. So I already have this repository in my VS Code, right? I already have this repository in my VS Code. So the first thing I want to do basically is to ensure that I am connected to my Foundry environment. And how do I do that? I do that by either running AZ login, right? I can do an AZ login. Uh, yes. So how did I do that? The first thing I did was to do an AZ login. And what this does is it pumps out my subscription and then asks me to choose where my agent is hosted. Of course, I've chosen the subscription where it's hosted. And the next thing I do is I run a script. So the script I'm running is this script here. You can see it, set up environment script. Now, basically, what this script does in particular is to verify that it's able to connect to this agent, the this agent here. That's what the script does, and that's why you would see that um, when I run this script, it then begins to populate the various subscription, the resource group, and then it gives me all the endpoints. So if you look at this now, you see this is the Foundry project endpoint for my agent, Contoso Travel, right? It tells me about the model behind the agent, the application insight behind it, and it gives me all the necessary values I need to know about what the agent, right? So that is what it does. Now, the next thing it does is to ensure that, okay, it's able to pull the workflow for any skill I'm calling. I need to ensure that my Foundry is running. That's my MCP server. My Foundry MCP server is running in here. So all I need to do that is just shift this, right? I need to do something like this, and I say something like this, shift command P, so you can see it's back to this, and or basically I can just do this and say list servers, right? And then I look for my Foundry MCP server. So you can see here is my Foundry MCP server and it's running, right? You can see stop, restart, disconnect account, show output, and all of that. So I need it running, so I'm not going to touch that, right? So the next thing I did was, after I ensured that the Foundry MCP is running in my environment, the next thing I did was to run a query, right? Which is take the endpoint here, which you have been able to connect to, and evaluate my agent at that endpoint using the observe skill, right? Remember, I told you that the skills have already been configured. Everything is already done. The workflow has been populated. So if I tell my agent in my VS Code to make use of the observe skill, it already knows the workflow. In fact, if you check here, and I say, for instance, show and run command, and I say configure skills, right? And I check um, Microsoft Foundry, right? If I click on Microsoft Foundry, it shows me the available skills here. So you can better see this when I project it in the preview mode, right? So I'm going to project it in the preview mode so you see, right? So all those things which I showed you in the URL are also contained in my VS Code. So the agent itself already knows what to do if I say I want to make use of the observe skill. It knows what to do, who to call, right? What resources to call or what commands to call to ensure that it's able to carry out all these stated workflows for an observe skill, right? So you see that the agent has to carry out all of this. And look at this. Immediately I put this in here and I say, evaluate my agent at this endpoint using the observe skill. You see, my agent began to perform, right? It starts looking for what the skill itself. You can see it here, right? So right now I'm using the GPT 5.3 codex as my model, right? Which I'm running in my VS Code, right? So you can see now it starts reviewing, right, all of the necessary files it needs to review for it to be able to run the observe skill, right? And you can see here it says calling get best practices, right, under the Azure MCP server, right? And then now says analyze evaluation code generation best practices. And then it begins to give you the necessary prompts, right? You can see it starts saying, oh, quality evaluation, run this 10 over 10 passed, right? And safety evaluations, this. Now, on this screen, which I will show here, this screen actually shows the process it starts initiating the evaluation. So one thing you will notice is that immediately it starts the evaluation, you will start seeing an update here. And that's, you will also notice that even when you come to this agent here, you would also see something like in process here. So right now you see completed because this was done some few minutes ago. You can see the timing here. This was done some very few minutes ago from now. So you can see that this was the last run few minutes from now, right? So now let's go back to VS Code, right? So in VS Code now, you can see all the metrics it had to do, right? It then queries the agent. And how does it query the agent? It just sends random prompts to the agent and then analyzes the feedback of the agent. So you can see here it says quality evaluation results, result counts, right? It says, you can see this query, what flights are available from Seattle to Paris in August, right? It checks the fluency, gives it a score, checks the coherence, gives it a score, checks the task adherence. Is it actually adhering to the task or is it saying something entirely different, right? Then it queries it further and says, find me a hotel in Tokyo with a hot spring. Now you can see that in order for it to actually observe this agent, it's giving it random travel details with various destinations. And it's trying to observe, okay, if I throw something random to this guy or to this agent, is the agent going to flop? Is it going to give me a wrong answer or is it going to give me an answer which I expect? Right? And that's what it's doing here. So once it gets the feedback, it evaluates it in terms of scores. So it checks for the fluency of the feedback, coherence for the feedback, and the task adherence. So you can see it does this going forward. So it lists up until 10 questions in trying to evaluate the feedback of the agent. And here the last one, it says, I need a family friendly hotel in Cancun with a kids club and pool. That was the last evaluation it asked it. And then of course it gets the reply and evaluates the answer itself. Right. So after that, it then does a safety evaluation of the responses, right? And then you can see, in order to conduct the safety evaluation is where it starts looking at, oh, are there any form of violence in the reply? Are there form of hateful speeches or unfairness detection? Or are there any self-harm defection words in his replies? Right? After it has analyzed all of this, it then comes back and says what? Evaluation completed. Now, once it says evaluation completed, you will then see here on the portal saying the evaluation has been completed. But before that, what you mostly see is in progress, right? And then, of course, you can click here to actually see the scores, right? So you can see this is the safety run, and you can see the status, the total target tokens that were used in this evaluation process, the overall score, and you can see the individual scores, right? You can see the individual scores. And of course, you can also see the total tokens that were used for this evaluation. In this case, 51,240 tokens were used for this evaluation. And of course, you can also download the raw JSON file to see what happened in this, right? So this is a scenario of how skills work, right? This is a scenario of how skills work. Now, there are also various skills you can work with. Trust me, you can work with a lot of various skills, a lot of them. Now, I could as well show you something on one of those skills. So I'm going to show you this. Good. So earlier on, right? Earlier on, before now, I actually downloaded some of the various skills that are available out there, right? I downloaded some of the skills out there, and I want to see how. So I want to try something different, something live that you can see, and then maybe round up from there. Now, in order for me to try this, right, uh, let's look at some of the possible scenarios on how to use these skills. So here is this document. Besides, I'm going to share this document with you so that you can actually carry these exercises on your own, right? So you can see this. Um, These are sample prompts which you can use to call most of those skills, right? So, for instance, um, if you remember, we spoke about the CI/CD skill, right? So, let's see what's like to call the CI/CD skill, right? So for us to be able to do that, all I need to do is say, set up a CI/CD pipeline for my Foundry hosted agent. That prompt alone should trigger the CI/CD skill, which is like a workflow, right? So I'm going to say, use this prompt, right? I'm going to use this prompt on here. But before I do this, I want to log into my terminal, and I'll say AZ login. Yes. I see that it's logged in and I choose my subscription, right? Where I want it to deploy if it needs to make any deployment, right? And also, I'm going to ensure that my Foundry MCP is running, right? So I'll say list MCP servers. So in this particular uh, VS Code that I use, I see that the Foundry MCP server is stopped. So I'm going to start it. So now you see that the Foundry MCP server is running, right? And once I can be sure it's running, right, then I can proceed, right? I can then proceed now. So where's my terminal? Okay, good. So this is my terminal, right? So now both of us are going to see how this actually works, right? So I'm going to paste the prompt here and say set up a CI/CD pipeline for my Foundry hosted agent, and let's see what happens. So I've sent in the query. You can see my agent trying to inspect. So you see my agent is already calculating and doing some of the workflows. So of course, it's going to look at it, right? Do you see what it says? I found a dedicated Foundry CI/CD guide in your repo. Next, I'll read it and scaffold matching GitHub actions, right? In file.github/workflows plus any required config template. So it now says this, allow this. So I'm going to allow it, right? Now it's actually calling the Azure MCP server, right? I'm now pulling the official hosted CI/CD quick start so that the workflow files I add match Microsoft's current recommended GitHub actions pattern. And I say allow once, right? So now you can see that it's reading the workflow, going to the internet to pick all the necessary details. It cross checks, is the workflow up to date, is it consistent with what we currently have in the Azure environment, right? So while it's doing all this, it's also researching. It's going to ask for the necessary variables to be imputed, right? So you can see right now that it has created a file here, right? You can see it has created a .github file here, right? You can see this is the file, and you can see what's happening here. This is the CI/CD template it's creating. Can you see this? Can you see this? So as it is now, just that statement alone, it's been able to create a CI/CD for deploying a hosted agent. Just with that one prompt, which I gave, and it's created a full CI/CD pipeline for deploying that hosted agent, right? So this just explains to you how the skills work. Just look at it as a documented workflow that tells your agent what exactly to do, what to build, what to look out for, what to delete or decommission, or how to observe your agent. How to test if your agent is performing as it should perform, and if it's not, going in a hyper loop or stuff like that. So, this is actually what making use of the skills look like. I think at this point, I'm going to be rounding up the session. And before I do that, I would just like to share with you um, some of these materials which I have used in the session.
Ah,
Yes. So, Hello, Bada. I don't know if there were any questions for me while I was speaking on this.
No, no, there was no question, but I mean, after the recording, if there is a question, we will coming back. It was a
Awesome.
nice, it was a nice session, Promise. Thank you.
Awesome.
I
Thank
mean,
you. Thank you.
I'm a big fan of the not the theoretical, but also the hands-on, the practical one. And this one was
Yes.
very hands-on oriented. So
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you
everyone,
very much.
yeah, so everyone can just, you know, follow your steps and can do it in their free time. So I hope
Awesome.
everyone at least learn one or two things. And if you are maybe a senior software engineer, so our sessions are not only for starter but also for senior engineers. So if you are senior, I hope
True.
adapt something new.
True.
And if
True.
you are a new engineer or a starter, I hope
Yes.
it was easy. I
True.
mean,
True.
you can reach us. We are in all socials, and we have promises
Yeah.
that we answer any
Yeah.
question.
Interestingly, we have the socials scrolling down this page. So, in case you're wondering, oh, how do I become part of this community or stuff like that? If you look at the down of the screen, you would see all of the socials where we are, right?
Yes,
And of course, you can follow us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on
Facebook.
Instagram, on Meetup. So, actually, when we have events like this or sessions like this, we would usually create the event on Meetup. So, ensure to always follow up with our Meetup page, register so that you can be updated with upcoming sessions. And of course, we stream live to YouTube, and now we are streaming to LinkedIn. Of course, probably we would also look at streaming to Twitter and other platforms, so that just any of the platforms where you feel convenient to use, you can as well get that knowledge which you need. And of course, these sessions are going to continue. They are not one off. So if you're not following our meetup pages, please ensure you do so.
Yeah,
Um, so thank you very much, brother, for this awesome session. I think it was really, really cool. Thank you for moderating and hosting the session. And bye bye, everyone. See you
yeah.
all in our
Yeah.
next session. Yeah, so of course, look out for our next session on our meetup page
Yeah.
and see you
We'll
there.
announce it soon.
All right. Bye bye, all.
Bye.